Yeah, you know, Braj Bihari does this conflict resolution mediation, and he says that the biggest source of conflict is when people make assumptions. And I think we do that a lot. Well, she should have known that, you know, I'm in school and I have, well, you know, whatever it is, she should have known, but people don't know, and we don't, you know, and sometimes we need to express, sometimes we feel we can't express. So to me, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Making assumptions about other people, but then also taking things personally. I think that happens a lot. Like, you know, she just bit my head off when I just said this, but okay, I'll tell you a story that comes to mind for me. This is a story. So there was this man on the subway in New York, early morning, Sunday morning, by himself on the subway car, very quiet. And then this other man got on the subway car with his two kids. And the kids are just running around, making noise. And the father of these kids is just kind of, like, you know, kind of slumped down like that. And this other man who was on the peaceful car before him is like, this guy, you know, why doesn't he control his children? You know, what kind of a father is this? And finally he was so exasperated, he turned to the other man and he said, "Sir, can you please control your children?" And the man who was kind of slumped down, he's like, comes out of his daze and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We just came from the hospital and their mother just died." So, you know, think about that. You know, we just make these assumptions that, oh, it's all about me, or she said this about me and what was she thinking, or, you know, but maybe it has nothing to do with you. Maybe she's got a lot on her plate. Maybe there's a cloud passing through her head today. Or maybe she just lost someone. You know what I mean? So both those things to me go together, making assumptions and taking things personally. And we talk a lot about offending devotees in our community, but I think another part of that is taking offense, you know? Like, cut some slack. You know, we don't know what the other person's going through, right? Cut them some slack, you know? And just about boundaries, I wanted to say that, I don't know if you've heard this before, but healthy people have boundaries that keep the good things in and the bad things out, like a good fence in a good garden, right? Unhealthy people have boundaries that isolate me, that keep the bad things in and the good things out. I'm just trying to help. I don't want your help, you know? So isolation can be very toxic, as anyone who's suffering knows. Sometimes just, and it can be, isolation can be toxic and it can be death. So, yeah, there's a story about a famous healer, Parker Palmer. He's a Quaker. He's written many books. So here's this personal story, that at a certain point, he went into a personal depression. And all his friends were coming to him saying, "Come on, you know, you're a great teacher. You've written all these books, and, you know, you'll snap out of it. It's just a matter of time." And nothing was helping. Nothing any of his friends were saying were helping him. But he had this one friend that was just showing up every Friday and just giving him a back rub. So sometimes it's not even about words. It's just about showing up and just being there for the person, just being there, deep listening. And I don't know, are we running out of time? But I don't know how much time we have, but
We're doing okay.
Oh, we're doing okay? Okay, so deep listening is really, really, really powerful. And I think it's a great unknown art, especially in our very talky community of preachers. You know, we want to preach, but so often we're not hearing, we're not listening. And there's this little acronym that might be helpful to you. It's been helpful to me, and I call it CHOT, C-H-O-T. I don't know if you want to write this down. So deep listening, first of all, the C, it clarifies misunderstanding. Like, oh, I thought you were mad at me because of blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's nothing to do with that, you know. Clarifies, right? So then H. Sometimes people just need to be heard, you know. Sometimes it's not about me talking and preaching and shaking my finger. It's just, wow, I feel so much better that someone just showed up to listen. So that's the H. So then O, it helps people come to their own conclusions. You know, just deep listening. Wow, just having you here, I realize that the whole problem is not that I'm angry, but it's that I'm sad. You know, that kind of thing. And then the T is that it builds trust. So that's, I think, really important. Yeah.
In terms of time, we're going to, we're like 10 more minutes and then we'll open up for discussion.
Okay.
But I really love the foundation that you're just sharing so many components of community that people can react to. The reason why we share this boundary sheet, I'm so sorry. I feel like you talk about this word, and also you might see it on social media all the time, but like, do we actually know what constitutes this? And this is a basic resource. I'm going to say that everything that we use at this retreat, I love having SUNY, I love working with Amrita and other folks that actually have this training and expertise. This is not supposed to be in lieu of you taking care of your needs or working with a therapist, but this is like general knowledge that's just helpful to know. And especially the back where we actually talk about the different kinds of boundaries. So I'm just going to read a little bit off of this sheet. Personal boundaries are the limits and rules we set for ourselves within relationships. A person with healthy boundaries can say no to others when they want to, but they're also comfortable opening up themselves to intimacy and close relationships. So a person that keeps others at a distance, emotionally, physically, or otherwise is said to have rigid boundaries. Alternatively, someone who gets too involved with others is considered to have porous boundaries. And of course, there's healthy boundaries here. Do two things at once. You can kind of see this broken down here, but I like later in the sheet where it says people have a mix of different boundary types. For example, someone could have healthy boundaries at work. We're talking about different settings, right? Healthy boundaries at work, porous boundaries in romantic relationships, and a mix of all three. I think in my family, do I have healthy boundaries in my family? I don't know.
With
no, with my parents.
I think you're good with Jake.
Yeah, I think we're okay, possibly.
He shows up at 1, and if we don't eat till 10 after 1, he's still
But I think we'll have porous in the sense that, like, I don't know if there's really oversharing with us, right? Like, we share everything, and like that's the appropriate venue for it. So, yeah, I think the point.
But sometimes you have a women's retreat, and he doesn't see you for 3 days, so that's really healthy too.
Yeah,
He's cooking for
He's
it.
cooking for it. Oh, you can't stay away from me. I'm just kidding. Okay, so appropriateness of boundaries depends heavily on the setting. And you can read through this. What's more valuable to me, and I think people can do their own work individually with boundaries, is just knowing the types. So there are physical boundaries, refers to personal space and physical touch. And intellectual boundaries refers to thoughts and ideas. So like, who do you actually share your political views with? Who do you actually share your beliefs with? That's a kind of boundary. You know, there are times when I feel it's safer for me to talk about my accomplishments at work with a certain group of people, or to talk about our ideas for new projects, and there's other people it's not safe to do that with. So I can have an intellectual boundary there and be like, you know what? I'm going to be let down by opening up in this space, so, you know, this isn't the place for me to show people how smart I am. Emotional boundaries, of course, refer to a person's feelings. Healthy emotional boundaries include limitations on when to share, when not to share personal information. I would consider that also just when you're sharing your feelings, like who do I feel really comfortable crying with and who do I not feel really comfortable crying with. Material boundaries, so refers to money and possessions. Healthy boundaries involve setting limits on what you will share in terms of your own money and possessions. And you know, you can think about that too. I don't feel like there's pressure on me to like give to the temple, but I also grew up in that way where it was like my dad told me my first paycheck when I got my first job to give it to the temple. And I actually thought that was a good way for me to learn not to be so attached to the money that I've made. But everyone's got to decide what works for them, and it's totally fine to set limitations on what you're willing to share, what you're willing to give. I actually think one of the most beautiful parts of community and faith-based communities is when someone is struggling and there's like a GoFundMe that goes up, and like that's so wonderful. But everybody has to really evaluate, you know, what you're willing to share, and it's okay to keep what you need for yourself.
Is that where you're going to tell the story about Linda?
No, not yet.
Okay. Okay.
And the last one is time. That one can seem hard, especially for me, when I get lost in several conversations and it's like an hour after I need to go home. But you can set boundaries with your time. And I will say, even as someone who's hosting a sangha or a program, or like with Urban Devi, it's an hour and a half, like you've committed an hour and a half of your time, and respecting that people are committing X amount of time to you on a weekday or a weekend is nice. It's not something I grew up seeing in ISKCON communities. I went to so many programs that were like 5 hours late, and dinner was whenever, and kids were hungry, and none of this happens at ISKCON DC. We really try not to have that happen at all. But yeah, if we have spaces where people can talk about this, establish these things, feel comfortable that their boundaries are being respected, I think it allows us actually a really deep community. So I don't know, is this worksheet helpful for you guys, this handout? Yeah, I just thought I'd print it out in case that's helpful information. And we can move on from boundaries.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. The time?
No.
Okay.
Can I just say something?
Yep.
Because I really want you guys to move forward, and I think this is a really important point. I'd love to see that you actually put boundaries / parameters for another word. I'm so triggered with the word boundaries. It's a heavy, loaded word.
Yeah.
It really is a loaded word, and for some people who had some heavy boundaries, I'm just saying if another word was used with that word, it might help people who are triggered to digest that, because I've gone into shutdown because of the words. That's just me personally.
Does it help to think of it as a garden at all?
No, I like it. We looked at other words. I'm fine with it now because I've just replaced the word, right? But I'm just saying, like, when we use words, that word is actually loaded. It's loaded in good ways and very heavy ways. And I'm just saying, if you really want to make a point moving forward to create community and parameters or healthy guidelines, boundaries is a heavy word. That's all I'm saying. I mean, maybe I'm the only one who's feeling like this, but everything you said was perfect, amazing, brilliant. But just the word boundaries can be just a bit loaded. I'm just saying
Yeah.
there's another word.
I feel like I
slash
talked to
with that.
Suni about this recently, and she'd given me another word, but I've forgotten
I'm
it.
saying boundaries / something else, just to create
Yeah.
a little bit more
Shara,
kind of walking into it.
Shara
Yeah.
has another word.
I wanted to say though, sorry, I'm gonna talk to her and see if we can remember what our word is. I want to make space for that, but at the same time, the heaviness that it comes with might be something that we evaluate. Why is there heaviness, and what is so wrong with the word boundaries for us? And I'm not saying we have to share it right now, but I think the parameters, and like you said, you understood what they were and totally were fine with that. But I think we should maybe different time or later explore what is that heaviness for people. I don't want to ignore the fact that you said that.
I guess it's just trauma informed. Like if you're creating a safe setting, like what I have to do in my work,
Yeah.
I have to think of words that feel safe to people.
Okay. No,
That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to help you guys realize it.
Shara?
I mean, in my personal experience with my mom, the word, we're developing a healthy relationship here. That would not
Yeah, connect with
connect with
her.
her.
Yeah.
Like me saying, I'm creating boundaries, like she would actually own that, and like, not own it, but understand, like, I'm serious. This isn't a la-di-da kind of thing, like, this is a serious situation, and then she perks up, and then she's like, okay, wait, she's being serious, you know? That's what, so different terminology will work for different people.
Yeah, that's what I was
Like,
thinking.
with me, like, for me to be taken seriously or heard, I have to use that word.
Right.
Boundaries.
So it might be loaded for some people in some ways and not for other people. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, you have something.
Yeah, I just wanted to just say something real quick. Sometimes, and this is not with respect to any one person individual, just in general, sometimes what triggers you is the one thing that you have to work the hardest on,
Yeah.
primarily because there's a situation in which I could feel something when someone says something. And you're right, it may have nothing to do with me per se, but a comment is made. I have a choice, and I have a choice to interpret that and get offended by it, right? Or I have a chance to clarify it and say, what did you mean by this statement, right? Or I have a choice to walk away from it.
Right.
So sometimes what you resist will persist if it's not uncovered. And the process of uncovering it is very painful, but almost necessary for self-growth.
Right, exactly. Like when Gopi said that, the first thing I thought was, I was looking up this idea of radical noticing, and I ran into this really interesting story of a woman. She was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and she was helping a patient who was realizing that she had a drinking problem. And so this therapist was listening to this woman. She was doing some deep listening, and the woman was saying, you know, I'm just starting to feel like I just don't feel good when I drink. And then I have a headache. And then, you know, and she was just, by this sort of radical noticing, she was looking at this problem. You know, so I'm thinking, look at this word boundaries. What is it that it's triggering? What is it that's bringing up? What is that memory or that situation or that experience? And really do some radical noticing about that. What is it? What was that when you were 17 or you were 23 or this happened to them? And really explode it and see, you know? I think that's kind of radical noticing in ourselves, and which we can do for ourselves or others.
I want to move on to the wounded healer piece, but I was also going to say that I also get that it's an overused word in some ways, for sure. Like I think that, and that's both the benefit, I think, of like social media therapy talk is that the knowledge is getting out, but also is the context out, and is that really the right space for people to go deep? Yes, Rashmi.
Sorry, I still have one question about boundaries.
Boundaries.
How do we respond if a person is repeatedly, occasionally breaking your boundaries, like or manipulating, whatever, like working around?
How do we respond if a person is regularly, repeatedly breaking your boundaries? Well, I guess you have options of what you can do. You know, you have to look, are you married to that person? Is that person your mother? Is that person your child? Is that person your boss at work? You know, like once I said to Sharmila, you know, because I think Indian people are so gracious in their offices and they get a lot of work dumped on them. You know, so she was saying something to me that they keep giving her more and more. And I said to her, well, you could say to your boss, well, if I do this, if I say yes to this, what would I say no to? Which is an interesting boundary type of a thing. If I say yes to this, so you kind of put it back on the boss. But it depends on the relationship, right? If this is your child, you know, you're not going to say, well, here's $50, good luck, you know, get out on the street and see how it works for you. No, you have an ongoing relationship and you have to say, these are the rules in this house. You can say it however you want to say it, you know. When you grow up, you can make the rules in your house. But in this house, these are the rules that we have. You know, we don't eat sweets before dinner. We go to sleep at blah, blah, and this is what, you know what I mean? If it's your husband, I feel like with husbands, it's really, really important, or partners, whatever, you're in a romantic relationship with somebody, or even a girlfriend, I think, you know. This doesn't work for me. You know, what you just said, or what you just did, it just doesn't work for me. So, you know, I know maybe you didn't intend that, but it really hurt. And you know, it's not all right with me. So I think that's a respectable thing to say, boundary-wise. Is that helpful? If it's your mother, Shara answered that. So Shara's, you know, has to be really boundary. Her mother will just walk all over her, you know. You know what, Shara, what do you say?
I mean, it took a lot of work. It's still a work in progress.
You don't speak about my husband like that.
Yeah.
If you're going to speak about my husband like that, I'm not going to be seeing you, and you're not going to be seeing my children. That's that.
I don't want to take it lightly that you asked that question, and would love to keep the space and even have Suni comment on it later. But I think ultimately, if you've clearly set, a boundary with someone and they're crossing it, you can't control what that person is doing. Then you have to make a choice about what your action is going to be, right, or how you're going to process that. But it's no longer, they haven't respected your boundaries, so then you have to figure out what's your next step. And I, again, don't know the situation, so I'm not going to say what you should do specifically. I have lost, not too many, but even one friend, thinking like how painful it is to lose a friend who you have to say, I'm sorry, but the things that need to exist for us to have a healthy relationship where I feel loved, seen, heard, and accepted can't exist because you're not, respecting the
Not
boundaries.
trustworthy.
Yeah. Is that okay, Rashmi? So I just want to share this one quote. We're going to talk about the wounded healer and conclude. I think we've had not enough of start to discussion back and forth, and whoever wants to stay and ask questions can, and we'll have to transition after that. I think it's an interesting concept because you mentioned how boundaries can be isolating in some ways, and there are times in community where you do need to extend yourself. It's not just black and white, like, oh, I had a boundary, I only had an hour to give, and this person clearly is having a meltdown, but my hour's up. You have to, in community, there is some part of extending yourself, which is a really beautiful part of the wounded healer. I love this quote from Richard Rohr, because it just kind of captures the struggle. He said, people who've learned to live from their center in God know which boundaries are worth maintaining and which can be surrendered. Although it is this very struggle that often constitutes their deepest, darkest nights. Both maintaining and surrendering boundaries ironically require an obedience because they require listening to a voice beyond their own, which I think of intuition and the voice of the divine, whatever it is that you'd like to call that. But I like that quote. I also think there's so many Richard Rohr stuff in our presentation we're not even going to, but I love that in some Christian philosophies that they have folks that are writing about, they're using this language and the way that they talk about their beliefs, and I really hope that in Bhakti we can keep reframing, not changing, but adapting the language that really speaks to the folks of the modern age.
Yeah.
So the wounded healer, there's like no context at all, but I do want to share a little bit about this book by Henry Nouwen. I don't know if he pronounces Henri, but
Henri
Nouwen.
Nouwen. He's from
Okay.
Belgium.
So this book, though this whole retreat is not like totally based on this book, there is a key piece of it that we took on. So this book is a bit, I would say the first half is a little bit of a social commentary from a Christian minister, talking about how the way ministry or connecting with people in a faith community was done doesn't work anymore. And his whole point is that people aren't going to come to church because their parents came to church or because they feel morally obligated to go to church, or that it gives them purpose. Like maybe later on those are important factors, but he's just saying that you have to go a lot deeper. And his whole thing is that you have to get in the mess with people. You have to be able to share vulnerably your own struggles in order to start a framework where people can share with you. And that's that concept of wounded healing, like that you actually acknowledge that someone's struggles and their wounds are valid, and that there's growth in community that happens when we share those together. Like yesterday when we did the cross the line, that was a perfect example of what's most personal is also universal. Yeah. So his first half of the book is more of a commentary, and the second half of the book is like, how do you really become a wounded healer? I'm not even saying it's a book like that I 100% recommend, but this concept was really beautiful, and we lived it this year. Vrinda Priya, you guys know Vrinda Priya, some of you know her from last year's retreat. Definitely my service sister in so many ways. And this year was really hard for her, and she's not with us this year at the retreat, but she told me I could talk about this experience. So Vrinda Priya last year spoke about her adventures walking El Camino de Santiago, and she had quit her job, and she had sold all her stuff and taken this brave leap to travel the world. And she did it for 6 months, and her biggest fear was I don't have a job, I'm traveling the world, like what if something happens to my health? And 6 months in, something drastic happened to her health, and she actually had people to care for her and bring her back to the States. And she came and stayed with me for a little bit, and she went and got a bunch of appointments done and like actually found out she was having a much bigger health crisis than she even knew was happening. And so she was living her worst fear. And in that time, she didn't have a place to stay, she didn't have a stable job. And she's one of my friends who's always been taking care of herself, like for a longer time than I wish that she has been doing. Like she's been doing it since a very young age. And she's always been stable, so for her to be in an unstable place is also like the most vulnerable time of her life. And
Her family's not there for her.
yeah, she doesn't have family that she can go to. She does have the DC community, which was actually so beautiful to see us come around. So while she did live with me, it was an indefinite situation, and we did have other devotees in the community, including Ananda and Gopali and a few others that were a little local, kind of formed this circle around her, where we were like, you know, they're like, Poonam and Che are able to handle so much, but at some point we need to set up where, okay, they need a break and she's going to come stay with someone else. And recognizing that we had needs also, but that we were willing to extend for our very best friend that the resources that we had to share, that we wanted to share those with her. And while she recovered for 6 months, she jumped from house to house, which was really beautiful. She also got to see several relationships up close because she was living with different families. And I know like she had learned, or she just got a lot of, she had a lot of reflections, let's say, from that experience of how different people are living in different ways. And she read the book, The Wounded Healer, and she was like, I really like this concept. And no one's really, people aren't totally going to get it when they see it as the retreat theme, but I think it's really powerful. And this is the story that she was trying to explain to me. Do you mind if I tell it? Do you
Please.
mind? Okay. So this is a story from the Talmud that's quoted in the book, which is from Judaism, is a scripture from Judaism. So there's a story where someone is asking how they can find the Messiah, or let's say the spiritually realized person. And the response that they get is the Messiah is sitting amongst the poor, amongst a group of people that are covered in wounds, and they are all every morning replacing the bandages of their wounds all together. Like that's their self-care. But the Messiah is the one who's changing one bandage at a time, binding his wounds one at a time, waiting for the moment that he will be needed, and essentially seeing, now that I've bandaged this one wound, who can I help before I take care of the next? And something that she was just sharing with me in that time was just like, basically there's not going to be a time where you're not struggling. Like me and Che are struggling, all the other couples that she stayed with, everyone's got struggle, whatever that is, and waiting for that time to be like, okay, when I'm not struggling, I can help someone. It's just never going to exist. And this story to her was just the most beautiful balance of self-care and taking care of your needs, and also in community, knowing how to extend yourself. And not that we did it perfectly, we definitely had at least one blowout fight in those 6 months. And you know, there was a lot of heavy emotions. She had so many emotions that not everyone had the space to. Not everyone all the time had the ability to hold space for, and then we all had heavy emotions around her as our loved one, but also everything else going on in our life. And I felt like TAG really came to life for us, and TAG is also a program we started together. And this wounded healer concept and how it really builds strong communities where people are caring for others but also caring for themselves. We felt it, and it was beautiful. And you know, you have these times when you're like, oh my God, this is like really hard and miserable. But we know that like in 6 months or 6 years, we're gonna laugh at that time. We had that blowout fight, and you like ran out of the house. You know, you remember? We have all of our fun night activities that I'm really excited about. But I'm also equally excited to have this conversation with Rukmini Walker. Everyone is, I think, quite familiar with Rukmini. And I had asked her to have this conversation around building community and talking about the wounded healer. And she had asked me if I would provide a space for us to have more of an interview conversation, like a fireside chat. So I'll be asking Rukmini a few questions, and I think she has a few questions for me and a few questions for you guys to engage with us. And we can have a little back and forth, but ideally you can save questions more towards the end. And I'm not recording any of our other sessions, but Rukmini is recording this piece.
And then the questions at the end. If you have questions or discussion at the end, we won't record that. So if you can move closer, it's really hard to speak when there's a gigantic cosmic ocean of space.
Okay. So we're so thrilled to have Rukmini with us. She is a pioneering force of women's spiritual empowerment, and I genuinely feel that. She was one of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to sleep a little more, I think, first disciples, and she is also the founder of Urban Devi. How many of you guys are participants of Urban Devi or familiar with the platform?
Oh, nice. Please join us.
So I want to say that the reason this is so apt for me, for Rukmini to give this talk, is because she's living this, right? She's building community for a lot of people here. And the fact that so many people come to this retreat because you have promoted it, Rukmini, I'm so grateful for that. And I think we have so much to learn and discuss and to hear from your experience as well. But yeah, when I think about someone who really can build community on a personal level and on a large scale, I do think of you, Rukmini. Is there anything else that you want to share about yourself?
You better say I'm Gauravani's mother, which is the only
Rukmini is also Gauravani's mom.
I have to tell this story.
Yeah, go ahead.
I met this little boy in Chicago at the temple in Chicago, and he goes, "You're Gauravani's mata." And then he goes, "Gurudev."
So to piggyback on that, I have to tell a story about Poonam. I was in India, and I went to Javika Swami's satsang, and I was there, and there was a brahmachari having a Mahar sweet. And he came up to me and said, "From Bangladesh." And I said, "Oh, my son-in-law and my granddaughter are Bangladesh, and they were singing at that time." He said, "Who's your son-in-law?" I said, "Gauravani in Canada." So he gave me the biggest piece of Mahar. My friends got a little piece, and I felt so embarrassed.
So if you want a really big fat burfi, just say you're a relative of Gauravani. Score some.
All right, so to kick off our conversation, I have a question for you, Rukmini. Why is community important, and really what's the definition of community?
Yeah, so maybe you've heard before that once an astrologer saw a picture of Prabhupada, and he said, looking at that picture, he said, "This is a man who can build a house in which the whole world can live." So to me, that's a question back for all of you, all of us, that, of course, first of all, a house is different from a home, right? So for you, I want to turn that back to you. What would that look like for you, a home in which the whole world could live? Anybody want to venture some thought on that?
A
Yeah.
place where you feel comfortable and accepted and a full expression of yourself.
Should I repeat, or is that okay there? Okay, great, thank you. Very good. Yeah, what else? You have something?
She wants them to repeat it.
Oh, please repeat it.
I can
Okay,
bring the mic
okay.
around.
I can also just talk louder. A place where you feel comfortable, accepted, and where you can be a full expression of yourself.
Beautiful. Okay.
A place where you feel nurtured. A place where you feel safe. A place where your talents are seen and engaged in service to Krishna and valued.
place where differences are appreciated and seeing the strengths of one another.
What do you think about that definition? Those definitions?
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I would say, well, first, why don't we put this quote from Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj that I think is so beautiful. We ultimately want relationships because we want a community that loves. We want to live a full life because life itself is really a love affair. It means that when we are not in loving environments or relationships, we are having real problems with the quality of our existence. When we are not happy, it means that we are forgetting our identity and purpose. Our dissatisfaction means that we are missing opportunities to share love, to give love, and to receive love. Isn't that just the best definition of community? And to me, do we have the other one, or that one's not up there? To me, my definition of community would be those places, let's see. Oops. Where do I have it? Here. Sorry, everybody. Here it is. The places where we are seen and heard are holy places. They remind us of our value as human beings. They give us strength to go on. Eventually, they may even help us to transform pain into wisdom. So I think that's really a nice definition of community. Yeah. You know, like even the smallest 2-year-old should be honored. The voice of a little 2-year-old should be honored. And to me, a home in which everyone could live would be a place where there are sort of common area spaces, like a living room or a dining room, where everyone can share and their voices could be respected, but also maybe private spaces where you can close the door. And maybe I'm a little bit more conservative than the other people in this house, or maybe I'm a little bit more liberal or radical than the other people in the house, and that's okay, you know? And every little voice is heard. I think that's the main thing. Think of Shara's family, where, you know, the adults look down, yes, and they get like a real answer from the little ones. So, yeah.
So my follow-up question for you then is, do you think our Bhakti communities, primarily the ones that are under ISKCON, or ISKCON communities, are meeting this definition? Are they meeting these standards of community? Honest answers only.
Yeah. Let's see. I think.
Just tell us what you think. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think some places and some people, and those places and those people are thriving. But, you know, unfortunately, it's not happening everywhere. And I just wish, I was thinking about this question a lot, and I was thinking that, you know, ISKCON's like 60 years old, and I don't know if any of you have seen this Harvard video, ISKCON at 50. It's really a great video. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. ISKCON at 50, Harvard University Conference. And this one wonderful scholar, Tom Hopkins, says in that video, he says some amazing things that we couldn't say. But one thing he does say that's really interesting, he says, ISKCON, like 50 years old, is doing pretty well in comparison to Islam and Christianity after their first 50 years. So I think we tend to not really see it in context. So it's an organization that's young, but I really wish there was more consistency. Like, you know, you go to, maybe you're a member of a Marriott chain or Holiday Inn or something, or people go to unnamed food chains that we don't have to mention, but they know, but they know what to expect. You know what you're going to get, you know. Whereas in ISKCON temples, it's unfortunately not like that. You know, like we have a pretty stellar example of what things should be. I don't want to embarrass Ananda too much. I'll embarrass her a little bit, but you know, it's pretty stellar here in Washington under a woman's leadership. Wow, you know, building that temple. With the help of community, but building that temple after so many male temple presidents talked about it and could not do it. So thank you very much. So, yeah. So anyway, I just wish there could be more consistency, and I don't see that, so that's really sad.
So can we get into that just a little bit?
Sure.
So if your definition is places, kind of summarizing what others have said too, that where people are seen, heard, and accepted, what has gotten us to be in the place today where we might have communities where that's not happening? What's contributing to that? How can we understand that?
Yeah, I think, different places have strengths and weaknesses. There's a lot of complexity in the world. We have to try to become more attuned, more sensitive to that. There's more than meets the eye. If we take time to care, everybody has a story. And if I can just take time and care to hear it. I think I wanted to talk a bit about radical noticing. I think that's a really important component. And what is radical noticing? It's bringing a conscious awareness to any needed area of one's own life or another person's life. I think that's really, really important to notice. You may be dashing over to the RT or, anything, and you notice somebody sitting by themselves, or maybe there's what appears to be a little depression or, a frown or a tear or something. So instead of just dashing by or hanging with our little cliques when we're at the temple, notice that person who's by themselves. And to me, the most sad thing is when you meet someone and you say, "Oh, have you been here before?" And they say, "Yeah, I was here about 6 years ago, but nobody talked to me, so I haven't been back since." So those are really painful things. I know, Eileen, you told me about your experience. I won't mention the name of the temple, but, having to kind of break through the interior kind of walls. And I don't think Prabhupada would be very happy about that we are making obstacles to people coming to Krishna consciousness, I remember when I first came to the temple in San Francisco, Malati was so amazing at just making me feel a part of this. This was kind of like, it seemed like a really kind of very exclusive San Francisco family. They had the Grateful Dead and the Family Dog and all these cool sort of San Francisco families. And this was another one, but she just made me feel like, yeah, this is your family, you're part of this. So I think that's really important. It's a very special person who can help us do that. And I think we should all be, it's radical noticing, radical personalism, and I think that's really Prabhupada's mission. We have a very personalist philosophy, but a lot of times we practice it in a very impersonal way. So that's a big problem.
Can you speak to that a little bit? So in our conversations, we had talked a little bit about just, is the philosophy being misinterpreted or not applied appropriately to create spaces where we're not actually having these strong communities? Just what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think what's real is the person. Radical personalism. What's real is the person. And, I was kind of bugging Ananda that we have to have the little condensed Prabhupada biography in the lobby and she put it there, I think the next day it was there. And I was so grateful. But, it seems like without people knowing the person behind this and the struggle he went through, it's all kind of theory. It's all just, But, to really practice it, what is radical noticing, radical personalism? I was thinking Jesus said, "As you do unto the least of these, you do unto me." And Krishna, what does Krishna say? Someone who says he's my devotee, she's my devotee, she's not my devotee. Only a person who says they're a devotee of my devotee is my devotee. So what does it mean? It means that we have to really care more carefully and notice and be that radical person who cares and reaches out and reaches around and just notices, and not be in our little safe little cliques with our friends, just show up for people and reach out and look out, I think bhakti's about reaching up to Krishna, but also reaching out. So those would be thoughts.
Do you think that fits with tag? Do you want to talk a little bit about tag?
Yeah.
I pulled up the vulnerability quote too, but I can speak about tag and
Yeah, wait for that.
too. So when we were talking about this concept of community, Rukmini asked me to share what the vision behind our tag program in ISKCON of DC is, and I think that it's something that goes beyond teenagers, but is kind of related to the wounded healer, related to a lot of the things we're going to talk about. But we started TAG during the pandemic for high school students. It was an online program, and the name TAG came about for a few reasons. One of them was for the age group, we were painting this picture of, you know, whether you are feeling like you're being pulled and you're running towards Krishna, like, oh my God, Kirtan is so awesome, and festivals are awesome, or you feel like you're running away from him, like, oh my God, I don't want to be seen at Harinam, and I don't want people to know that I'm a devotee. It was like, whatever part of that spectrum you're on, it's totally fine. Just come to our program and let's talk about it. And that's kind of like playing a game of tag with Krishna and normalizing that. But the other part of it, the community part of it, was just that if in young people we can instill this, what does it mean to be in community where when when people need us in our community, how do we actually show up? And they say, you know, tag, you're it, I need you right now. And other times there's going to be times when you actually need it and can tag someone else to be in. And we tried to model that throughout the program, but one of the small ways we did that was during COVID we had the kids create these care packages. I don't know if they remember those. And so basically through a QR code, you'd have a care package delivered to your door, and then you would scan the QR code and know who's the next person that you have to create a care package for. And then the parents share, you know this, your husband jokes with me about how much he hated this program because he had to drive all around Maryland to like deliver these care packages. But it was a really sweet, I think, bringing to life the theme that we had created of, you know, someone's doing something nice for you and then you got to pay it forward. And they were actually anonymous too, which was nice. You didn't know who you were getting the package from.
I remember the cupcakes landing in our front door.
Oh yeah.
Chocolate vegan cupcakes.
Wow.
And it was like, what? Where did these come from? And I was like, it's tag. I was like, oh!
And what do you think, Vrinda? Vrinda's my daughter-in-law. Do you think, I think it really made the kids connect, you know, Karva. Revati was already in college, but I think it was both of them.
Yeah, they were in high school. Yeah, we got them for their high school years.
Yeah, it really made them feel like, wow, the point is, this is family. You know, I belong here.
Yeah. I think tag really fits into the wounded healer, which we're going to get to in just a little bit, but I'm going to give it back to you. You had put this piece about vulnerability, and what role do you think vulnerability plays in community?
Shall we read that?
Go ahead.
Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater purpose or deeper and more meaning in our lives, vulnerability is our path. Brene Brown. So I wanted to share a story that really speaks to this for me. We have a Vaishnav Christian dialogue that's been going on for 26 years here in DC. You could start one in your city too, but it's a very cool thing. For many years we met here at this center. And one of our partners in dialogue was this beautiful man, Dr. Gordon Melton. And he's like a white guy from Tennessee, and he had this amazing story he shared. So he said that when he was in college, he went up in the cafeteria, so he's in Tennessee, right, the Jim Crow South. And he goes up to this other student, this black student in the cafeteria, and he says to this other young man, he says, I have a problem. I'm wondering if you can help me with my problem. And this young man looks up and says, oh yeah, what's your problem? And he says, my problem is that I was raised to hate you. And I don't think that has anything to do with what Jesus Christ taught. So I'm wondering if you can help me with that. And so this young man and Gordon Melton, they started like spending time at each other's homes, spending weekends, having dinners at each other's homes, and they became really, really dear friends. So this is, this is world changing. This is, I told that story to Madhvacharya. He said, wow, he's a very brave man. So this is world changing. This is culture changing, and I think that's what vulnerability does. And to me, it's way beyond like the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. It's beautiful, but it's just human. In Bhakti, we have this beautiful theology that it's every living being. It's the earth, it's the animals, it's the birds, everyone. So I think we have a precious gift here to share that can really impact the world. Oh, I wanted to share this other story about, okay, so this is another story that I think really impacts our community. So there was one father, okay, so he was at one of the temples in Europe, and his little daughter had her little purse on her shoulder, and she was going down the slide in the playground, and that purse caught on the slide, and she choked and she died. And really sad story. So this father, he was saying afterwards that devotee father, and he was saying that devotees were coming to him after his daughter died, and they were, what he felt like, this is the way he expressed it, he felt like they were trying to fulfill their own need to preach. They weren't really there for him in his loss. They weren't really being that wounded healer. They were kind of like, I feel so good, I went and preached, But it was not helpful. So, so we have to be really sensitive to be that wounded healer, to really be sensitive and be, come to the place of empathy where someone really is. And really it has a lot to do with, I think, radical hearing, radical listening, deep listening. Talk about that more in a bit.
So the other side of vulnerability, so vulnerability is really hard, and I think this retreat is a place where we're trying to create that space that not every place intentionally is creating, which we need to work on for sure. But the other side of that, I think, is boundaries. And I think I forgot to pull this up, but we wanted to ask this question because I think that while healthy vulnerability is there, something else we struggle in our community is taking care of our own needs for many, many years. Like, devotees have really needed a lot from other devotees, and it can be really hard to say, hey, I need to take care of myself or my family or prioritize my children, prioritize my job right now. And it's something that I thought we would explore, though I'm not a therapist. I asked Amrita and any other therapists if they want to comment on more details, but I have a little resource for you guys on boundaries that I'm going to pass out. Give me 1 second to switch gears, but the question that I want to ask everyone else, why is it hard to set a boundary? And the other element of that is, like, how can it be empowering? Does anybody want to share why is it hard to set a boundary?
Yes.
You don't want to disappoint the other person.
You don't want to disappoint the other person.
Good, yeah.
Sometimes it feels like selfish in a way, and you're like taught to like not be, like not do things that way.
Right. Let's repeat that in case other people didn't hear.
Sorry.
We're taught to not be selfish.
Yeah, and it feels selfish to.
It feels selfish to.
Yeah, set a boundary.
Yeah, set a boundary. Yes.
You think it's your responsibility?
You think it's your responsibility to help this person. Yeah. What else? Yes, Jadran. Jenna, you want to say something?
Go ahead. Okay. So it's kind of the way it's all laid out, right? So boundaries always seemed like they were for, like you start out in school or family, and boundaries are given to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you
Boundaries are given to you.
Here are the rules.
Expected.
Here are the boundaries. So we understand them as something that are given to us, not something that we can actually identify for ourselves.
Not something I can identify for myself, but something that's given by my mother, my father, my family,
Family,
my
my
whatever,
school,
my school,
and then employer.
my employer, we don't do this.
We don't get to identify what
Right.
works for us.
Right,
It's like, this is the job,
right,
these are the boundaries you will agree to, or no money.
right. We can't identify ourselves.
That's why the mic's not.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
We don't identify those things for ourselves. It's defined by the company, the family, the community, whatever. Good point. Jadurani.
I think it can be a lack of self-love.
A lack of self-love.
Say more. Say more.
Say more about it? Yeah, so, when you set boundaries, when you set boundaries that are healthy, then it's good for your own development. And sometimes we don't set them because we don't think we're worthy of that kind of care for ourselves.
We don't set boundaries because we don't think we're worthy of that kind of care ourselves. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Yvette.
Sometimes it's work to establish a boundary, so initially, when you're trying to set a boundary, you might experience kickback or resistance.
Right. It's work to establish a boundary, so you might experience resistance or kickback. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah.
I think tolerance comes to mind. We're taught to be tolerant, so what's the limit for quote unquote tolerance, and what's healthy tolerance look like?
Right. Right. Yes. And under your point, yes.
Someone said conflict avoidance, that resonated with me too.
Conflict avoidance. Yeah. Very good. Yes, way back there. Osea.
Sometimes because of fear, like what we might lose if we set a boundary.
What we might lose if we set a boundary, right?
So what about the other side? How can it be empowering?
How can it be empowering to set a boundary? Anybody want to say? Yes.
I think it can be liberating in many ways. Set a boundary where you're at peace with your decision, even if it's difficult for you.
It can be liberating, you said, in many ways because...
Even if it's difficult for you to set the boundary, you are in a way liberated from the cycle of guilt and am I hurting that person and this is what I can give at this time and this space. It's not selfish.
Yeah.
It's just meeting that middle line where you're not self-absorbed, but you're not giving yourself up.
Beautiful. Not self-absorbed, but not giving yourself up. It can feel really peaceful, right? Yeah? So, yeah.
Sometimes it's unclear what's an expectation versus what's a responsibility, so that's where...
Sometimes it's unclear what's an expectation or what's a responsibility. Yeah.
So, I mean, someone can share this. Somebody else want to share?
Where's Janaki?
Boundaries can empower, as Brene Brown says, to be clear is to be kind. So it's actually a service to the other person when you set a boundary because then
It's a service to the other person when you set a boundary because they know the expectations. Yeah, great. Yes.
A boundary can be looked at as something negative, but it also can support the other person and you.
A boundary can be seen as something negative, but can also support the other person as well as you. Yeah, what I was thinking, yeah.
I feel like also boundaries don't have to be with another person. It could also be with like work or like school or like anything like that. So like if you set a boundary, like I'm just gonna work until like I can, and then like I'll stop at this time. And that's
Right.
also setting a boundary for your
Setting a
personal growth.
boundary for yourself, like I'm not going to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning working on this. That's a healthy boundary also. Great, very good. Yeah, Lee, you have.
I think setting a boundary also shows the other person you want to continue this relationship, you want to grow
Very
this.
nice.
So it actually, shows that I'm interested in continuing to get to know you and have you get to know me.
Beautiful. It shows that the other person that you want to continue the relationship in a healthy way. Great. And Nartaki.
It's helped me to cultivate and reinforce my core values so that I can offer the best of myself to those in need.
reinforce your core values so you can offer the best of yourself to those people who need. Yeah, Gopi.
I'm just curious, I know that, I'm just curious because, is there another word that could be reframed to use the same meaning of boundaries? I just am curious because for me it's a loaded word. It's extremely loaded. And I just feel like I agree with everything that everyone's saying. But I'm kind of curious if there are similar words that carry a bit more positive connotation to it. That's just how I'm feeling.
But what if you think of it like, sorry.
Something that I was going to say, it creates respect, a true sense of respect. So I always saw boundaries as respect. Like
I like that.
You know, like,
yes.
I think there's a toxic way people like, you know, you gotta respect me, like you gotta count, you know. But actually, it's respecting yourself and creating a culture of respect for everyone to know exactly where they are on that scale.
And I think, so creating respect, you could say a boundary of respect, but I would also add a boundary of trust.
Trust.
It creates trust. And I think that's a big deal in communities and a big deal in relationships. And I wanted, I had so many thoughts on this, but we have to trust, but we also have to be trustworthy. Like if somebody says to me, tells me something in confidence and tells me, this is very private, don't tell anyone. And I just tell, one or two people and tell them, well, don't tell anyone. So then, am I trustworthy? And have I, will I be trusted by that person in the future? And I think if we look at Srila Prabhupada, I have so many thoughts on this, I could tell you so many stories, maybe we'll have time, but Prabhupada was so trustworthy, because everybody could see he's not in this for himself. He's not making any money at this. He's not out for prestige or power. He's just like basically starving, homeless, with no support, and doing this for you, giving bhakti to you and, for his Guru Maharaj. So he's so trustworthy. So I think we have to become like that. And I think trust, like, what I was thinking about Suni. Where's Suni? Is she here? Did she go home?
Resting.
She's resting. Okay. So I was thinking, Suni, like, if you need a psychiatrist, or you think you might need a psychiatrist, you want to check out Suni, maybe you check her website. And first of all, you want to see, is she trustworthy? Is she kind? Is she caring? Will she open her heart to hear me? But I think there are two components to trust. Character is one, and the other one is expertise. Does she have the qualifications? Does she have the certification to be a real psychiatrist? But I think first of all, character. You're going to have heart surgery. You want to know, is this guy a really fine, ethical person who's going to open my heart and give me quadruple bypass? And then, does he have the proper qualifications from a medical school? So I think we have to become trustworthy.
Great.
So,
well, one thing that you had mentioned that we can explore, and I want to, I'm sorry, I don't know, I should change the screensaver time. Keeps going away. I want to also mention why we are sharing this handout with people. But one thing you had talked about was that boundaries help avoid.
Comedy is tragedy after some time has passed. So, it was really hard, the fights and everything, but after some time has passed, you can, and that's real family, right? And you reminded me also, a friend of mine has been married for about a year, and she's, kind of perfectionistic, and she and her husband are we've never had a fight, we're never gonna have a fight. And I keep telling her, you have to learn how to fight. You have to learn how to fight using I sentences, and these are my needs, these are my boundaries, this is what's not working for me, and really be able to express it, because that's healthy. And then she goes, I think we just had our first fight. But I wanted to share this other Messiah story. Are we at time?
Yeah, so after that, I want you to talk a little bit about Srila Prabhupada and his vision and how you see him as the wounded healer.
Yeah.
But after that, we do have to conclude.
Okay, well, I just wanted to share this other Messiah story because I think it's really precious. So this story, the way this story goes is the abbot of a monastery was having problems in the monastery, and so in his town he went to a rabbi at the Jewish temple, And he said, I'm having a problem at the monastery. No new monks are joining, and the few monks that we have are getting old, and they're kind of not really very inspired, and they're kind of fighting with each other. So what's your advice? What do you think we should do? And so the rabbi said to him, he said, well, I can't answer your question. I don't know the answer to your question, but I'll tell you one thing. One of you in that monastery is the Messiah. And the abbot of the monastery goes, what? How could that be? I mean, which one could it be? Could it be this one who sleeps in the morning? Could it be this one who's always fighting with everybody? Could it be this one who's really sloppy? You know, and he just goes back to the monastery and he tells the other monks what he heard from the rabbi, and they're all like, wow, could it be you? Could it be this one? Could it be that one? Could it be me? And they all just started treating each other differently. Like, well, maybe it's me, maybe it's you. And they all just started treating each other as sacred and precious. So I really, really love that story. And to me, that's kind of a good segue into, can I?
Talk about Shil Prabhupada.
Oh yeah, we're out of time now? Okay, well, let's see. Can I share 2 quotes?
Sure.
Okay, so here's a couple of nice quotes that I don't know if you have on slides, but I do want to speak about Prabhupada, but these are beautiful, I think. So here's one. Hope thrives in the midst of, do you have this in a slide? Okay. Hope thrives in the midst of hopelessness. Hopelessness is not the opposite of hope. Despair is the opposite of hope. In the midst of hopelessness, hope thrives because it will not give in to despair. Although the situation is hopeless, and remember we were talking about surprise this morning? And people can understand, well, what is it about surprise? Okay, here he says, although the situation is hopeless, there is always room for surprise. Despair assigns reality a deadline. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Hope knows that there are no deadlines for reality. That is why hope thrives in the midst of hopelessness. So be open for surprise.
Who wrote that?
This is Brother David Stendhal-Rost, who's a wonderful teacher of gratitude. One of my favorites. He's a Benedictine monk. Okay, here's the other one I wanted to share. This is from Henri Nouwen, from one of his other books. He says, people who have come to know the joy of God do not deny the darkness, but they choose not to live in it. They claim that the light shines in the darkness, that light that shines in the darkness can be trusted more than the darkness itself. And this is really Wounded Healer, isn't it? And that little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness. They point each other to flashes of light. Who's the person who's lightning? Whose name means lightning? Krishna Nandini's friend, is she here? Her name means...
Vijay?
Yeah. Vijay.
Lightning.
Lightning. Your name means lightning. Is that amazing? Okay. They point each other to Vijay, to flashes of light here and there, and remind each other that they reveal the hidden but real presence of God. So I really like that. So I can take a few minutes to talk about Prabhupada. I really feel like Prabhupada came as a wounded healer. He came, penniless, homeless, starving in New York. He was like just totally like a wounded healer, and he was just giving of himself so generously in so many ways. There's a million stories. Which one should I tell? There's no time for any of them.
I mean, I like this as a closing question.
Okay. Okay. Just one little.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I like this one little Philadelphia story. There's some Philadelphia people here, so this is a really sweet one, I feel. Okay, so Prabhupada was there. There was a rented half of a duplex. Prabhupada was there for a few days at the Philadelphia temple. And all the devotees were waiting outside for Prabhupada to go on his walk. And so on the other side of this duplex, there was this little old lady sitting in a chair out on the porch. And so Prabhupada comes out the door, down the stairs, and all the devotees thinking he's going to walk up the walk and go down the street with them. No. So he walked down the stairs and walked over to the little old lady on the other side of the duplex, and he started talking to her in what the devotees said was old people talk. And he's saying to her, "Do you have any grandchildren? Do you still have all your teeth? I have my teeth." And he's just like talking to her like that. And the devotees are like, "Why isn't he telling her to chant Hare Krishna?" Like, you know, and so, you know, so making himself so vulnerable, so accessible. And then what does the old lady think? She thinks, these are very nice people, right? You know. Okay, so here's this beautiful story, my most favorite story. A disciple asked Srila Prabhupada, "Is there any service I can do for you?" Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes, you can go where I will not go." The disciple said, "But Srila Prabhupada, you are going everywhere. Where is it that you won't go?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "To the future. And by the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them." Wow. So,
I was telling Rukmini, don't be nervous about this. It's just no formalities, and that's exactly what it ended up being. She's like, "Can I keep talking?" I'm like, "No." And she's like, "I'm gonna keep talking out of me." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Which is actually why I love our conversations, and we had several before this, and I hope that whatever it was, that something stood out to you as a takeaway that you can walk home with. And I'm sure it'll be different for everyone. So I'm going to share one thing, though, if that's okay, because it's actually not related, but it's related to Henri. Okay, say his name properly for me. Henri Nouwen. Okay, so I told you about this when I was listening to the audiobook, and I just think it's an empowering thing to hear at a women's retreat. So I was listening to this book, and why I'm not totally recommending this book is because the language is, it's a little heavy, it's a little formal, and
many years ago.
no, it's like 2014, I think. No, it's older. Oh no, so then I'm listening to like an audiobook from 2014. Okay, so it is, that makes sense. That makes sense to me that it was a long time ago. And 72. Okay, so it totally makes sense to me then, that language. But
so we're cutting him some slack.
Yeah, but I'm listening to this. I wonder if this was in the book itself then, because I listened to the audiobook, and there was this part at the end where he says, it's like in the appendix or whatever, like it's after all the credits. And I'm listening to this book, and I'm slightly getting, we use the word triggered, I'm slightly getting triggered because he's using a lot of male-forward language and talking about men and like not really mentioning women except for the context of wives. And I'm just not relating to the language, but I also know that like I can take away something from this without totally loving the writing style. And at the end of the book, he said at the very end that he had a lot of people to thank, and he was listing them out. And he said, "I've asked for feedback on this book, and I've heard from a lot of the women that read this book, especially his colleagues that he really respected, that he was using a lot of male-forward language and that women would not see themselves in this book." And so he took a moment, I guess, to write, I'm listening to it, to apologize to all of the women that were listening to his book. And he said that I listened back, or I read back, and I see the point that is being made, and I recognize that I did this, and I will try to do better in the future. And I just felt like, it was so sweet, and like I struggle sometimes when I read some of even our scriptures, and even sometimes with Srila Prabhupada, who grew up in the 1900s, you know, seeing some of his writing that's not totally using the language of the modern day. And I just really appreciated that he gave that context. And I also told my husband, I was like, you have to listen to this 1 minute way that this very academic, very respected man apologizes to women. And every man should just do this. I was like, this is it. It's simple, and it's not like self-deprecating, and it's not over the top. It's just an authentic way of being like, hey, I get it. I can do better. And if we were in communities where we could just be real and say, Yeah, no, I didn't, you know, I didn't understand, and now I understand I'm gonna do better. That would be really, really great, and I wanted to say that that's also part of making inclusive spaces, right? We talked about creating an inclusive space, particularly I wanna prioritize making the devotee queer community feel comfortable, and sometimes the language we're gonna use isn't gonna be correct, and I think if we create spaces where we can learn and do better, like that's progress, and that's what we need to be doing.
You reminded me of one story I want to share. Sorry, it's really short, it's really short. So Kunti's here, right? See Kunti back there? Okay, so I was having this conversation with Kunti a while ago. She doesn't even remember this. And I was telling her that my husband was asking me, would you go to a baseball game with me? And I was being all, you know, snide and, you know, irritating. And I said, well, could I bring a book? You know? And so Kunti said to me, this is so sweet, Kunti said to me, no, she was so wounded actually, so touched. You know, she said, no, you should go and you should enjoy it with him because he likes it and you should like it because you're, and I just thought that was such a really beautiful wounded healer type of a sentiment. So just wanted to share that.
Can we give a round of applause to